6 sinister internet stories revealed, haunted encounters with cursed weirdo strangers discovered. The night was heavy with tension, shadows creeping like fingers down the street. Sarah tapped her fingers on the dimly lit counter at the diner, trying to shake off the chill that settled deep in her bones. The small towns lay silent, but online, a storm brewed. Her screen illuminated a forum headline. 6 sinister internet stories revealed, haunted encounters with cursed weirdo strangers discovered. She leaned closer, heart racing, pulse quickening. The stories told of homes invaded by strangers, whispers in the dark, and eyes watching from the backyard. Each tale twisted into a darker narrative, each word a countdown to her own creeping dread. Just steps from her own door, Ethan and Mia laughed, but dread replaced joy when anonymous messages flickered on their gadgets. "I'm just next door and I can help you." Who could send such a thing? The thought curled in her stomach, heavy and cold. She brushed it off at first. Living in a suburban bubble, the worst she had to deal with was a bad tip or burnt coffee. But pieces shifted, a jigsaw she hadn't signed up for. One glance at the rust-colored van parked outside made her pulse race faster. No driver in sight, just a vehicle seeming to settle into the night as if keeping vigil over her family. The whispers increased at the playground. They were too far away to make sense of, yet too familiar to ignore. As if conspirators had gathered, invisible and intent, stuttering smirks chasing her from the corner of her eye. Every time she dared to speak about it to the police, she was met with the shrugging indifference that dug deeper into her already frayed nerves. Just neighbors looking out for one another, they'd say, as if trust could shield them from grave dangers hidden behind friendly facades. But the feeling left a cold sweat that dripped down her back. What if they were the problem? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, Sarah could no longer ignore the shadow stalking her home. Armed with a heavy heart, she fled with the kids. The moments ticked like a countdown, and she felt it, the sense of being pursued. An unseen presence trailing closer. They navigated the dim streets, the chirps of restless crickets replaced by a pulsating sense of dread. Each step echoed the gravity of her decision, each turn bringing that rusty van back into focus. The thought pricked at her mind. They weren't alone, not anymore. Arriving at the diner to find some comfort, she felt a wave of relief. But as she turned, who was waiting there? The man they called Mr. Friendly. A name that now chilled her blood as surely as winter's frost. The warmth she had expected morphed into a frigid smoke, and suddenly she recognized him. His smile the cover for something darker. She felt the world shift as dread painted itself in vivid strokes across her vision. Panic clawed inside her throat. He was no protector. Could he be the very shadow she feared? A predator masked in community trust? The truth bubbled, waiting to explode. Can she shield her children from the very neighborhood she thought was their safe haven? Or would she plunge deeper into a twisted nightmare that defined their lives? The clock ticked ominously on the diner wall, each second drowning Sarah in a deeper pool of anxiety. Mr. Friendly leaned against the counter, too close, his smile stretching wider. It wasn't the friendly sort that now felt familiar, but the kind that could splinter a heart in two. The shadow of his presence loomed larger in her vision, twisting not just the room around them, but the very notion of safety she'd clung to for years. "Everything all right, Sarah?" he asked, his voice smooth like honey. Bow rose in her throat. She forced a nod, though her instincts screamed for her to flee. She glanced at the kids. Ethan and Mia were oblivious, their heads buried in their devices, voices echoing with laughter that seemed entirely out of place. Too safe, she thought. Lightly tapping the counter was the only mantra stopping her from bolting. "What do you want?" she blurted before she could hold back. The diner fell silent, other patrons turning their heads, eyes piercing her with silent judgment. The clatter of silverware faded, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat pounding in her ears. His smile faltered just for a moment, a brief flicker of something dark, something predatory, catching in the dim light. "Just checking on you and the kids," he replied, forcing back a manic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've been on my mind lately. Heard you were out and about in the neighborhood. It can be dangerous out there at night." "Dangerous?" The words ignited an electric jolt through her, tinged with icy fear. "I'm fine," she snapped, instinct screaming to protect her children. Each second that ticked by increased her sense of urgency. Something wasn't right. His presence felt like a noose tightening, one that could choke the very life out of what she held dear. Ethan looked up from his tablet, his face etched with confusion. He sensed the shift, the tension that thickened the air. "Mom, who is he?" he asked, curiosity flaring in those innocent eyes. Mr. Friendly straightened, smoothing his shirt. "Just a neighbor, buddy. You can always count on neighbors, right?" He turned back to Sarah, emphasizing the word count with a slight head tilt, a gesture that sent a shiver skittering down her spine. The air felt electric, charged with a sense that hovered just outside her grasp, a danger poised to strike. The diner door swung open, swinging against the walls like a breath exhaled. Sarah turned instinctively to see a flurry of shadows invade, their faces lined with the pale light of the street lamps outside. It was a police officer, not the same indifferent ones from before, but one with urgent lines etched deep into his brow. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you," he said, his voice firm. Mr. Friendly's expression froze, the flicker of fear in his eyes undeniable. "About what?" he interjected, the coolness in his tone losing its edge. "Please step outside," the officer insisted, casting a wary glance toward the man who had been lurking too close for comfort. Her instincts screamed for her to get the children out, but she hesitated, torn between the urge to flee and the growing tension brewing in the diner. "What's going on?" she demanded, but the officer's solemn gaze pushed her forward as dread coiled into her stomach. "Ma'am, we believe there's a man in your neighborhood," he stopped, searching for the right words. "One who isn't what he seems." The walls seemed to close in around her. Shadows shifted, whispers echoed, and she knew her nightmare was unfurling, each moment propelling her deeper into darkness. Could Mr. Friendly be the threat? As the officers moved toward her, she heard Ethan whisper, "Mom, why are we scared?" Their innocent eyes searched for reassurance, but she could only blink back the fear. The walls rattled as she felt the grip of a nightmare tightening. How could she protect her family when the very fabric of safety had unraveled? Then from behind, a familiar voice chimed in, chilling her to the bone. "Don't worry, Sarah. I'm right here." Who was watching now? Just how deep did this horror run? The tension in the diner thickened like fog rolling in from the coast, wrapping itself around Sarah and squeezing tight. Mr. Friendly's smile twisted grotesquely, and the patrons who had been quietly observing began to murmur amongst themselves, their expressions a mill of confusion and concern. "Ma'am, we have reason to believe that your life might be in danger," the officer said urgently, his eyes darting from Sarah to Mr. Friendly and back. "We need to get you and the kids to safety." "Safety from what?" she demanded, her voice rising above the whispers. The officer stepped closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a dark secret. "There have been reports of a man watching families, documenting their routines, and he fits the description." "Is it him?" she blurted out, her fingers shaking as she pointed at Mr. Friendly. The officer's expression hardened. "We can't make accusations yet, but we need you to listen. Stay close to us." At that moment, Sarah felt a pull behind her. She turned to find Ethan and Mia glued to their seats, eyes wide, confusion splashed across their young faces. They didn't understand the gravity of the situation. The looming threat felt like shadows in an overly sunny day. "Mom," Ethan said again, his small voice trembling. "What do you mean by danger?" A scream clawed at Sarah's throat, but she swallowed it down. She felt trapped, her heartbeat a drum of impending doom. "Just stay close, okay?" she managed, her words more for herself than for her children. Mr. Friendly retreated into the shadows, his smile now warped, somehow more disturbing the grin of a wolf cloaked in sheep's clothing. Come on, Sarah. You don't really believe this, do you? He said, his voice deceptively soothing, like a lullaby sung under the weight of a nightmare. A shudder ran through her. He was playing games now, testing her resolve. Step away from her, the officer barked, stepping between them, his tone sharp like a whip. What if I don't? Mr. Friendly's eyes gleamed with malice, the air around him crackling like a live wire. Don't, Sarah whispered, knowing full well every second counted. She inched back toward the officer, her hands gripping Mia's tighter. She could feel the tremors race through the child. Then, without warning, a crash echoed through the diner, the sudden shattering of a glass sending the patrons yelping in surprise. A figure burst through the glass door, another officer, breathless and panic-stricken. Get out! Now! The urgency flooded the room, terror mingling with confusion. The children screamed, and chaos erupted. Sarah felt an icy finger of dread snake around her heart as she grabbed her kids, eyes coming back to Mr. Friendly, who stood unmoving, his grin still plastered, yet eyes wild with an unhinged urgency. What is happening? Ethan shrieked, clutching her leg. I don't know. Just stay with me. As they turned to follow the officers who were ushering everyone toward the exit, Mr. Friendly's voice rose above the chaos, chilling and hypnotic. You can't leave yet, Sarah. You don't even know what really lies out there. Everything plunged into darkness. The lights flickered, then went out completely. In the silence that followed, panic swelled, a frantic pulse thumping in her chest. She couldn't see anything, couldn't hear the reassuring voices of the officers. Kids, hold on to each other, she cried out, her voice strained and raw. But all she felt was fear, a shroud of malevolence wrapping around them, pressing in, suffocating her. Someone was watching, waiting. Then she heard it. Their footsteps, heavy and steady, stalking close. Were they too late? And in that split second, as her instincts kicked in, she realized she needed to make a choice that could cost her everything. The flicker of light from a cell phone illuminated the room, casting sinister shadows. Who would emerge from the dark? Mom! Help! Her heart raced. What was waiting in the darkness? Something was coming for them, something relentless. Would they escape, or were they already too deep in the nightmare? The darkness wrapped around them like a shroud, thick and oppressive. The children clutched each other, their breaths shallow and quick, as they huddled close to Sarah. Panic surged through her veins. She fumbled for her phone, desperately tapping the screen to light the way. Ethan! Mia! She hissed, trying to keep her voice steady. Stay right here with me. The dim glow revealed the diner in chaotic disarray, overturned chairs, gasps and shouts filtering through the darkness. The familiar smells of grease and coffee mingled with fear, mingling into a nauseating concoction. Where are the officers? Mia whimpered, her voice small in the cavernous room. I don't know, honey, but suddenly, a shadow darted past the flickering light, swift and silent. Sarah's heart raced. Who's there? She called, but the darkness swallowed her voice. And Mom? Ethan stammered. What was that? Before she could answer, the crunching sound of shuffling feet filled the air, drawing closer. They were not alone in the dark. Forgetting her fear, Sarah shifted into protective mode. She raised the phone higher, illuminating the diner in glimmers of light that painted grotesque forms against the walls. Is anyone hurt? She shouted, desperate for a response, for anything that would ground her in reality. The shuffling paused, silence hanging heavy like an old, worn-out blanket. Then the lights flickered back on with a harsh flicker, illuminating the scene. Patrons crowded together near the shattered door, eyes wide, expressions frozen in a tableau of terror. And then her gaze snapped back to the corner where Mr. Friendly had been. He was gone. A cold knot twisted in her stomach. Did anyone see where he went? Sarah shouted, her voice trembling. It's him, isn't it? A voice, trembling and unsure, issued from the back of the crowd. He's the one. Shut up. Another voice barked, an older man with wild eyes. You don't know that. The words echoed in Sarah's mind, but she forced them aside as her focus returned to the children. We need to go. Now. But as she turned, the barrier formed by the crowd shifted, blocking their escape to the exit. "I can't breathe, Mom!" Mia cried. The fear in her little eyes was breaking Sarah apart. She knelt down, gripping her daughter's shoulders with firm hands. "Look at me, Mia. It's going to be okay. Just hold on." The tension in the room snapped. Another crash jolted through the air as the door burst open again, and the officer staggered back in, panting frantically. "Everyone stop! Get back!" he shouted, his face a mask of panic. "Have you seen him?" Sarah called, her voice cutting through the desperate murmurs of the crowd. "We need to secure the building." "He is still here," the officer barked, eyes darting wildly. "Everyone out! Now!" The crowd stirred at his words, fear propelling them toward the exit. Sarah turned to direct her children, but the moment halted when, out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Mr. Friendly slipping into the diner's shadows again, eyes glinting in the overhead lights, a faint smile curling on his lips. "No!" she shouted, but it was too late. The diner's occupants surged past her, the weight of panic clamping down like a vice. "MOM!" Ethan shouted, his voice piercing the chaos. He was being pulled away, and she reached out desperately. "Ethan!" Then, without warning, the lights flickered again, plunging them into shadows. In the melee, the weight of the unknown pressed down around her. Sarah struggled against the tide of terror, but the darkness opened up before her, swallowing her breath. A hand brushed her arm, a fleeting touch. Her heartbeat quickened as she instinctively pulled away, searching through the obscured forms. "Mom! Over here!" It was Mia, her terrified scream rising above the din. But something else was creeping in, an unsettling whisper coiling around her thoughts. What if this is what he wanted? Images of what lay ahead swam in her mind. A choice to make in the thin line between survival and the deception lurking out of reach. "Get to the back!" the officer shouted, voice echoing in the dark. As she moved toward Mia, a chill raced down Sarah's spine. Had they already stepped into a trap? As the lights dimmed once more, she wondered what horrors awaited them if they ventured into the night. The urgency hung heavy in the air. A choice lay ahead, but she was out of time. Could she save her children before the shadows closed in forever? The seconds stretched as Sarah's breath quickened. The diner's air thickened with terror, an invisible fog that pressed down on them. "Stay close," she urged, her voice strained but determined. She gripped Mia's hand and pushed through the crowd, moving toward the flickering lights that seemed to taunt them with the promise of safety. "Mom, what about Ethan?" Mia whimpered, her small voice almost lost in the chaos. "Sure, I'll find him. Just hold on tight," she whispered, feeling the tremor in her own hands. The crowd surged like a sea of panic, pushing back as they all fought for the exit. Shadows danced violently around them, each flicker of light revealing fleeting shapes that clawed at the edges of her mind. They had to get out, but the closer they got, the more Sarah felt it, an electric charge building in the air, pulsing with dread. "Ethan!" she shouted, fear piercing through her like a knife. But no response came, just the maddening cacophony of desperate voices and slamming bodies. Then, a low growl reverberated from the corner of the diner, sending a cold shiver down her spine. She strained to see, her heart thumping loudly in her ears. The shadows churned, and amidst them, she caught sight of Ethan isolated, backed into a booth, eyes wide with terror. "Ethan!" she cried, raising her phone, desperate to illuminate the path to her son. But the light flickered again, casting sinister shapes that loomed larger with every flicker. "Stay where you are!" an officer hollered, but it sounded distant. More chaos erupted near the exit. Patrons screamed as they were shoved by unseen forces, only adding to the chaos. "Mom, help!" Ethan called, his small voice now drowned in the tumult of fear. Without thinking, Sarah started toward him, her heartbeat racing. She had to reach him before the shadows took him. The crowd moved like a tide, but she fought through, determined. Suddenly, the officer's voice broke through, stern and commanding. "Everybody needs to evacuate now." The lights died completely, plunging them into utter darkness. A deep silence enveloped the diner, thick and suffocating. Then came a sharp, bone-chilling laugh echoing from somewhere close, high and thin, like metal scraping against metal. Sarah froze. It was him. Mr. Friendly? The fear crystallized in her throat, and she forced herself to breathe. Mia, stay behind me, she whispered fiercely, heart pounding. She struggled to orient herself, the soft weight of Mia's small hand grounding her in the dark. Mom, I'm scared, Mia whispered fiercely, her voice trembling. Me too, Sarah admitted, her mind racing. But listen, we have to find Ethan. We have to move. As the eerie laugh echoed again, it was joined by an unsettling sound scraping nails against metal, followed by soft patterings that seemed all too close. Mom? Is that you? Ethan's voice trembled, uncertain in the void. Yes. Where are you? Her voice came out louder than she intended, breaking the stillness. I'm over here. The sound of his voice was faint but hopeful. Before she could respond, something brushed against her leg. A jolt of ice shot through her. She pivoted, holding the phone high, but the glow was barely cutting through the darkness. And there it was, a shadow too tall, too thin, with a head that bent at a disturbing angle. Sarah, the whisper felt like a caress, chilling and intimate all at once. She gritted her teeth and edged closer to Ethan, terrified of what she might find. We're coming. Hold on. The silhouette shifted, grinning wider as if it was relishing the fear thick enough to slice with a knife. The laughter swelled, echoing like a siren, wrapping around her, drawing her deeper into despair. Mom, Ethan's voice was barely a breath now. Stay close, she commanded fiercely, trying to cut through the mounting dread. But the laughter continued, a sinister melody that made no sense, echoing off the diner walls, wrapping around them like a rope. What if it wanted them to come closer? What if this was the end? Run! She screamed, grasping Mia's hand tight as dread washed over her like a tide, pulling them down. Into the darkness. Could they escape the trap closing in on them? Did they have time to outrun the shadows that wanted them all? The darkness swallowed them, thick and oppressive like a nightmare made real. Sarah felt her heart racing as she yanked Mia along with her, stumbling blindly through the chaos that enveloped the diner. She could hear the frenzied breathing of other patrons, the sharp gasps mingling with the unsettling laughter that echoed around them. Where are you, Ethan? She murmured, desperation clawing at her throat. She squeezed Mia's hand tighter, trying to reassure herself that she wasn't alone. Mom, it's so dark, Mia cried out, her voice breaking into a sob. Just keep walking, Sarah urged, glancing over her shoulder, heart sinking at the sound of shuffling steps behind them. The shadows seemed to converge, a living mass pulsing in the darkness. They reached a table, and Sarah paused, her hands reaching out, feeling for something, anything to guide them. Ethan! Can you hear me? She shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of terror. Over here! Mom! His voice was small, but there was a flicker of hope, a sound that lit up the dreadful void just enough for her to find him. She pushed forward again, dragging Mia along, praying it wouldn't take too long. But something gripped her ankle. Cold fingers, a jolt of ice traveled up her leg. No! She yelped, shaking her foot, feeling more than seeing the shadow shift at the edge of her vision. Sarah bit her lip, fighting the urge to scream. Mia, stay behind me, her breath caught as the air thickened with a chill. And don't let go. The laughter burst forth again, an unsettling melody that made her skin crawl. So much fear delicious it taunted, echoing off the walls of the diner. Sarah felt the shadows dance around them as if they had a mind of their own. M.O.M. Ethan's voice came again, frantic, pierced by the sound of something scraping closer, nails on metal, slow and deliberate. She could taste the terror in her mouth, metallic and bitter. Hold on, baby! I'm coming! She pushed through the memories of their safe home, the warmth of sunlight, the smell of fresh cookies. Those thoughts were a fragile shield against what lurked in the dark. Finally, she stumbled upon Ethan's booth, relief flooding her body. There you are! She gasped, reaching out for him. But as she grasped his arm, she felt the coldness of his skin, a dreadful disconnect. Ethan, what's wrong? The booth transformed into a sinister abyss, shadows pooling around them like dark water, ready to drag them in. Ethan's eyes, wide and vacant, glimmered with fear. Mom, he whispered, I can't see anything. A figure loomed before them, elongating impossibly as it moved. The soft light from Sarah's phone flickered, clinging desperately to life. Sarah, the shadow rasped, mocking her, you thought you could escape? No! She screamed, pulling Ethan closer. But it was too late. The figure lunged, laughter stretching unnaturally, tearing through the darkness and echoing in her mind. Panic surged in Sarah as she felt a bone-chilling wind whirl around her, snatching at her clothes, trying to tear her from the booth. Mom! Help! Ethan cried, fear shattering like glass. Run! Get out! Sarah shouted, but just then the phone flickered once more, illuminating the space. What she saw froze her blood. Faces, anguished faces, pressing just outside the edge of the light, trapped in agony, former diners, unable to escape. Mia! Ethan! We have to go now, she urged, her voice frantic with despair. But as they began to shuffle toward the door, shadows cut in front of them, blocking their escape with watchful eyes, hungry and full of malice. Sarah could feel their presence intensifying, an overwhelming desire to consume everything they had. Run! She yelled once more, pushing against the weight of despair as dread wrapped tighter around her like chains. They moved, fighting against the suffocating darkness, but was the exit truly further away than it seemed? A glimmer of hope flickered with each desperate breath. Could they break free, or had they wandered too far into the grasping void? But somewhere within the diner, the shadows whispered of betrayal, of the easy road to despair. Would the truth reveal itself to be darker than anyone could foresee? Mom, I can't see. Ethan's voice clawed through the suffocating blackness, rising in pitch. Panic prickled at the edges of Sarah's mind. Stay close, she barked, wrapping her arms around her children, trying to shield them from the unseen dangers. She could hear the whispers intensifying, filling her head with a cacophony of dreadful promises. We won't let them take you. But her own whispering doubt gnawed at her resolve. The faces still lingered just outside the dim halo of her phone's light. They contorted into expressions of anguish, mouths wide in silent screams. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that some of them were familiar, echoes of people she once knew. Mom! Mia's small voice quavered, squeezing her hand tighter. What if they get us? Not if I have anything to say about it, Sarah replied, firming her grip as if her fingers could ward off the encroaching shadows. We're getting out of here. They edged towards the door, heartbeats drumming, but shadows surged forward, curling and swaying with hungry intent. The laughter echoed louder, wrapping around each word like a noose. Delicious fear. The shadows had faces too, mocking expressions that twisted in delight. Sarah felt a wave of nausea hit her. She stumbled backward, dragging her children with her, retreating to the perceived safety of the booth. We need a plan, she whispered, frantically scanning the room for an escape that didn't exist. Think, Sarah, she thought. The back door. There's always a back door in diners. Mom! Ethan prompted again, clutching his sister's hand between trembling fingers. What do we do now? I don't know, panic dripped from her voice. Their family unit, once a steadfast circle of love, was collapsing under the weight of terror. With a deep breath, she turned, eyes wide, searching for a flicker of hope. The shadows seemed to sway on the edges, retreating from the pooled light, as if sensing her desperation and ready to strike as soon as she faltered. Okay, we need the back door, she repeated, finding the resolve to move. Her legs felt like lead as they crept toward the opposite side of the diner, adrenaline coursing through her, as she carefully navigated the maze of booths and cold tile, shadows whispering threats all around. She could barely think straight, consumed by the enormity of their situation. They couldn't let the darkness win. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed behind them, something heavy falling from a table. Sarah's heart raced. We have to hurry. She gripped each child's hand, summoning all her strength as they darted past unwelcoming gazes. The back door should be close if she could just get her bearings. Just then, the light flickered, surrendering to the encroaching darkness. She turned, dread pooling in her stomach. "We're almost there," she urged, voice shaking. But the shadows thickened around them, no longer just creeping but pressing, a terrible force pushing against their very souls. "You cannot leave!" The laughter was a symphony of anguish, an orchestra of despair ready to claim them. "Ethan! Mia! Hold on to me!" Sarah shouted, desperation pouring into her words. In the thick, choking darkness, she could feel their presence, hungry, primal and burning with a need that would drown them. The back door yawned in front of them, just a few feet away, yet it seemed to stretch further with each step. The darkness gathered, claws of shadow reaching toward them, insistently wrapping around her legs, her arms. "No!" Sarah screamed, furious and terrified. She jerked away, wrenching her children along with her, pushing against the terror. Will they break free? Or would the shadows consume them whole, leaving nothing but the echo of their screams in the dark? Just as they were about to reach for the doorknob, the whispers crescendoed into screeching madness. "Stay, delicious fear!" They bellowed. In an instant, everything went silent. The air crackled with tension. Sarah paused, confusion dawning. What had changed? She felt the weight of the shadows against her skin, not just them, but something else, something worse, lurking just beyond the door. Steeling herself, she gripped the doorknob tight. But before she could twist it, a warmth enveloped her shoulder, chilling her to the bone. A voice, quiet and feral, whispered in her ear, "Let us finish this." What did that mean? What had she unleashed? The door stood before her, no longer a beacon of hope but a portal to something more devastating. The shadows trembled in anticipation, ready to take their claim. Could they escape whatever haunted this cursed diner? Or was there something far worse waiting beyond? The cold doorknob felt slick under Sarah's grip, an icy reminder of dread wrapping around her heart. The shadows whispered again, their chorus of despair mixing with the voice that lingered like smoke at her ear. "Let us finish this." Just as bile rose in her throat, she twisted the knob, determined to break through the suffocating dread that enveloped them. But the door didn't budge. A laugh, sharp and harsh, pierced through the silence, a sound that felt like nails on a chalkboard. "Where do you think you're going?" The voice echoed from the other side, deep and mocking, like thunder cracking down on her fragile resolve. "Mom!" Mia cried, her voice trembling, "What's happening?" "Stay close, just stay close," Sarah hissed, her heart racing as she pushed against the unyielding door. With every ounce of strength, she threw her shoulder against it, praying for some release, a crack in the suffocating darkness that clung to them like a shroud. Around her, the shadows pulsated, breathing in sync with her frantic heartbeats. She couldn't see their twisted faces, but she felt their eyes boring into her, judging, measuring her fear. "This isn't what you think," she murmured to herself, desperate to goad her own courage. The whispers rose again, drowning out her thoughts, a symphony of eerie delight that made her skin crawl. "Fear is tasty, Mom." Ethan's voice slashed through the haze. "It's too much. I can't breathe." Sarah squeezed his hand tighter, feeling the warmth there, the only thing keeping her anchored amidst the rising tide of terror. "I won't let them take you. I promise." Suddenly, a tremor in the air pulled at her attention. The shadows were shifting, darting away for a split second, as if in anticipation. Something was coming, and Sarah could feel it, a heavy pulse in the air that made the hairs on her neck stand on end. "Mom!" Ethan said again, this time fear spilling over into sobs. "What's behind the door?" Waves of dread crashed over her, battering her shield of resolve. "It can't be worse than this," she shouted, as if daring the specters to prove her wrong. She leaned back for another desperate attempt at ramming the door open. But instead, it swung wide. An abyss of complete blackness greeted them. A heavy scent wafted through, familiar but tainted. It was almost like smoke mixed with something sharp and metallic. The shadows erupted forward in a rush, clawing at her children. "Run!" Sarah yelled as she spun on her heel, dragging Ethan and Mia with her. The diner was alive now, the shadows dancing hungrily, amalgamating into grotesque forms that jeered and howled as they fled. They stumbled through the flickering lights, which dimmed with every terrified step. And then, out of nowhere, a figure materialized in the center of the room, a tall figure, swathed in shadows, but with burning eyes piercing through to their very souls. "Where's the fun in letting you leave?" it crooned, its voice oozing malice. "Get away from us!" Sarah screamed, her voice a wavering thread of courage. She pushed her children back, placing herself before them like a wall, ready to fight whatever nightmare awaited. The whispers grew louder, becoming a chaotic roar that rattled the glass and filled her mind. "You wanted to leave? How about a trade? What do you want?" she spat, clenching her jaw. The darkness writhed, mocking her bravado. "Your fear, of course, or perhaps a life for a life." The air thickened, the weight of the proposition settling upon her shoulders like a heavy fog. "Mom, what does that mean?" Ethan stammered, a mix of confusion and terror. She couldn't answer. Her mind raced. What choice would she make? Could she sacrifice her own safety, her children's safety, to fight the darkness? A heart-stopping silence descended, and the shadows stilled, waiting for her answer, the tension crackling like electricity, every heartbeat a countdown to an unsure fate. As she glanced back at her children, fear weaving through the crumbling threads of her resolution, she felt herself teetering on the brink. What would she sacrifice to break free from this nightmare? And just then, the shadows began to swirl faster, drawing her closer to a decision she wasn't ready to make. What exactly would she be giving away? Imminent doom loomed, and Sarah realized this was only the beginning of a dark reckoning. The choice was hers to make. But what horrors awaited once she chose? The shadows coiled, and Sarah could feel the air grow thicker, suffocating her resolve. The figure's burning eyes glowed brighter, swallowing the dim light of the diner, and transforming it into an abyss. "Make your choice, Mom," it said, the words curling around her like smoke, wrapping tighter as she fought for breath. Ethan's small hand trembled in hers, and for a moment, the world narrowed down to just the three of them, and the looming terror floating just beyond the edge of reason. "Mom, don't!" Mia pleaded, her voice a fragile whisper, resting just above a sob. What would fear be worth in this bargain? Sarah closed her eyes, trying to conjure the memories of simpler times, family dinners, shared laughter, the comforting scent of her children after a long school day. Every precious moment fought against the darkness swirling around them, desperately clawing to keep it at bay. But the shadows were relentless. They buzzed in her ears, urging her to succumb. "Isn't it delightful?" they mocked. "To release that heavy burden? To let it go?" The figure leaned closer, its breath hot and rancid. "Your fear is delicious, but perhaps a little despair might sweeten the deal. Get away from us!" Sarah screamed again, even as dread clawed its way up her throat, choking her sincerity. It was a pathetic noise, small against the encroaching darkness, but she couldn't give in. "Not yet." "Mom!" Ethan cried, his small body pressing against her, searching for safety that seemed to elude them. But the room was shifting, the walls melting into the growing shadows, and Sarah stumbled back. "We have to go, now!" An instinct inside her kicked into gear, and she began to pull her children backward, hoping to find a way out from under the tightening grasp of the shadows. Every step felt like wading through molasses, as if those very shadows sought to drag them back. The laughter of the figure echoed in her mind, taunting her desperate escape. "Fleeing? How quaint," it sneered, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Do you really think you can outrun your own dread?" They reached the back of the diner, a flickering exit sign overhead glowing in an exasperating dance with the shadows. Sarah's heart pounded a rapid beat, quickening with every inch they gained toward freedom. But the exit was barred, a horrifying black wall formed of coiling darkness, more solid than any door. She could feel the pressure of the shadows behind her, like grasping hands reaching for her children. "Look!" Mia shouted, pointing to something on the wall, a pulsating shape, like a beating heart embedded in the darkness. "Something S in there." Ethan's voice quivered, barely above a whisper. "What if we can break through?" Sarah thought, her breath catching. The shadows began to writhe more violently, responding to her renewed determination. We have to. Mom, don't! Mia begged. The figure was closing in, the shadows snapping eagerly at her heels. You can't escape. There will always be a price to pay, it hissed. If it's a choice between betrayal or self-sacrifice, then I choose to fight. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Sarah hurled herself at the wall, arms extended, ready to shatter the darkness with every ounce of her strength. The shifting shadows screamed a deafening sound that made her ears ring, but she pressed forward, and in that moment, she felt something shifting inside her. Do it, Mom! Ethan's voice surged with hope, igniting her resolve. But just as she reached out to break through, the darkness solidified, absorbing the impact, and yanked her backward. Everything went black for a heartbeat, and then she gasped, finding herself alone in a swirling void of smoke and terror. Panic surged. Where were Ethan and Mia? Mom! Their voices echoed, fading like whispers. She spun around, dread swelling as her heart raced. The shadows began to congeal, forming shapes she did not recognize, their unity reflecting her worst nightmares. In her desperate search for her children, she stumbled into a patch of darkness that felt different, heavy, suffocating, unyielding. Sacrifice a life? She murmured, horror blooming in her chest. How could she choose? Then, a revelation struck her, slicing through the fog of fear. There's another way, I just have to find it. Just as the thought solidified, the shadows convulsed, and a new form emerged, a swirling vortex of chaos beckoning her closer. As it pulsed with an insatiable hunger, the darkness spoke, resonating within her. Join us or lose everything. The choice lingered heavily in the air. Sarah clenched her fists, uncertainty gnawing at her. What price was she willing to pay to save her children? And as the shadows whispered her name, she realized she had only begun to uncover the true horror of this eerie nightmare. What if the darkest parts of her thought were the key to their escape? Time slipped away, and the sinister chant of the shadows filled her ears. One thought echoed, what will it cost to find out? A breath caught in Sarah's throat as the shadows around her morphed, filling her mind with twisted thoughts that flickered like dying embers. Moments stretched into eternity, each heartbeat a reminder of the fear and isolation that clawed at her very essence. She couldn't succumb, she wouldn't. But what else could she do? Her children's echoes pulled her back from the brink. Ethan! Mia! She screamed, her voice raw with urgency. The shadows danced, but something stirred within her, an ember of fierce love igniting defiance that spread through her like wildfire. She wouldn't allow them to take her family without a fight. With each breath, the air thick with dread, she stepped deeper into the swirling mass of darkness. I'll find you, she whispered, determination hardening within her. If there was a way out of this nightmare, it would be through the depths of the darkness itself. The chaotic whispers turned to cries, swirling around her like a storm, beckoning and taunting her all at once. Join us or lose everything. The figure looming before her shifted its weight, eyes burning like twin suns. What do you choose? Each word dripped with malice. I choose my children, Sarah shouted back, her voice a fierce counterpoint to the despair threatening to drown her. And I choose love over fear. The shadows paused, as if processing her declaration. In an instant, the void shook. She felt it. A tremor rippled through the darkness, fear echoing against her fervor. The swirling shadows surged toward her, but she stood her ground. In that moment, something shifted, a crack in the darkness, like lightning striking through a clouded sky. Mom! A voice called, fragmenting the stillness. It brightened the void, igniting sparks of hope. We're here. It was Ethan's voice, small but steady. Ethan! Where are you? Sarah's voice broke, tears of desperation pooling in her eyes. Go toward the light, Mia cried, and Sarah swiveled. The shadows recoiled, instinctively drawing back from the beacon of love that lit up the abyss. Holding on to that bright thread, Sarah pressed forward, driven by the force of her children's voices that intertwined with the murmurs of the darkness. I'm coming, she called. The shadows screamed, furious at being thwarted, the darkness shifting and convulsing, attempting to reclaim what it had lost. Stay with me, she urged, focusing on Ethan's and Mia's cries as they drew nearer. The flicker of the light grew stronger, illuminating twisted faces of lost souls trapped within the shadows. They clawed at the edges, mouths open, silent in their anguish. But Sarah turned away, her heart heavy but resolved. She wouldn't become one of them. As she rounded a corner, light spilled in from a far doorway, the exit sign shining brighter than she'd imagined. The tantalizing hope swelled within her chest, lifting her spirits. They were almost there. Mom! Behind you! Ethan yelled, terror skyrocketing. She spun on her heel to see the shadows surging towards her, angry tendrils stretching outward. They were moving to engulf her in darkness, but the door was open now. Run! Sarah screamed, adrenaline flooding her. Hand in hand, she shot toward the glowing exit, the sensation of cool air hitting her face like a lifeline. With grim determination, she propelled her children forward, their little hands squeezed tightly within her own. Light poured through the door as they raced for freedom, the shadows bellowing behind them, a cacophony of rage mixed with despair. And then they crossed the threshold. As the weight of darkness fell away, the warm glow of the diner enveloped them like a hug. She glanced back and the shadows slinked away, retreating as if burned by the brightness spilling from the doorway. The patrons who had fled stood scattered outside, faces filled with worry and relief. Ethan and Mia clung to her, eyes glistening with tears and disbelief. I thought we lost you, Ethan said, voice cracking. You were so brave. But as they stood there, bathed in the soft glow, Sarah understood the true cost, the realization that they had overpowered the darkness through their bond, through unwavering love. They had faced terror together and emerged, stronger than ever. We did it, Sarah whispered, letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Together. Always together, Mom, Mia said, her small voice steadying Sarah's racing heart. As they embraced tightly, a shift in the atmosphere, a coolness that lingered on the edges, whispered warnings about the shadows that could one day return. But she would face them again if it came to that. Because in their fight for survival, they had unearthed an undeniable truth: the strength of love could conquer even the deepest shadows. The tension released, giving way to a restored sense of hope. Sarah had protected her children, and they would walk home into the light, together, leaving the darkness behind. But as they turned toward home, a chilling laughter echoed faintly in the distance, a reminder that shadows may linger longer than expected. Knowing the fight was never truly over, but that love would always guide their way. Don't let the darkness win. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about how they escaped. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.